They called me selfish for asking where the money went, standing in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, their faces twisted with a moral outrage that almost made me buckle. My parents insisted the inheritance was already gone, sacrificed to save my sister, because that is what families do. They thought shame would keep me quiet. They did not expect me to come back with a single piece of paper that proved their sacrifice was actually a felony. The silence in my apartment was expensive, but I had paid for every second of it. That was the thought that anchored me most mornings as I stood in my kitchen in Graybridge, waiting for the coffee to brew. At 32, I had rebuilt my life from the scorched earth of a divorce that had left me feeling like a guest in my own history. Now, 2 years later, I had a job as a project manager that paid the bills, a therapist named Doctor, heiress who did not let me get away with vague answers, and a heavy, quiet peace that belonged entirely to me. I did not ask my parents for help. That was the unwritten rule of the Russell family ecosystem. My younger sister, Madison, was the weather pattern stormy, bright, unpredictable, and my parents were the climate scientists trying to manage her. I was just the geography. I was the solid ground they walked on to get to her. I was fine with that. Or I told myself I was fine with that. Right up until the day we buried my grandmother, Grandma Edith had been the only person who saw me as something other than a utility. She had been small and sharp, a woman who dried flowers and hoarded savings bonds, and her death had left a hole in the world that felt dangerously wide. The funeral was a blur of black wool and damp handshakes. I spent most of it managing the logistics, directing the florist, making sure my mother had tissues, keeping Madison from making a scene about how much she was going to miss the woman she had visited maybe twice in the last year. It was at the reception, held in the fellowship hall of the church, that the first crack appeared in the surface of things. I was standing near the coffee urn, trying to discreetly massage the tension out of my lower back. When Mrs. Gable approached me, she was one of those ancient, permanent fixtures of Graybridge. A woman who had known my grandmother since before the interstate was built. She gripped my hand with fingers that felt like dried twigs. "You look just like her," Mrs. Gable said, around the eyes. "Thank you," I said, giving the polite, practiced smile I kept for these occasions. "She was a wonderful woman. She worried about you," Mrs. Gable said. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "She wanted to make sure you would be okay. I am glad she got it sorted. It must be a relief, knowing she looked out for you like that." I frowned. "Just a fraction. What do you mean, the estate?" "Dear," she nodded, patting my hand. "She told me last month. She said, Kennedy is the one who never asks, so I have to make sure she does not have to." A cold prickle of confusion ran down my neck. My parents had been managing the end-of-life details, just 2 days ago. My father had sat me down at his kitchen table, looking grave and exhausted, and told me that Grandma's estate was simple. He had used that specific word, simple. He said between the nursing home costs and the medical bills. There was essentially nothing left. He had said it with a sigh, as if he were relieving me of the burden of hope. "Oh," I said to Mrs. Gable, keeping my voice neutral, "I think the medical bills were quite high at the end." Mrs. Gable looked at me, her head cocked to the side, her eyes narrowed behind her thick glasses. Well, she certainly did not think so. Before I could ask anything else, my mother appeared at my elbow, steering me away with a hand on the small of my back. "Mrs. Gable, you look lovely," my mother said, her voice bright and brittle. "Kennedy, darling, Madison needs help with the car." I let myself be steered, but the conversation stuck in my throat like a fishbone. I drove home that night feeling a strange dissonance. My parents were not liars. They were dramatic. Yes, and they were obsessed with appearances. But they were not malicious. If they said there was no money, there was no money. Mrs. Gable was 80 years old. She had probably confused me with someone else. Or Grandma had been talking about spiritual wealth. I put it out of my mind. I went back to work. I went to therapy. I paid my electric bill. Then, 10 days later, the text came. Family dinner Sunday, 5 p.m. We need to have a budget talk. It was from my mother. The phrase budget talk made my stomach turn over. In the Russell family, a budget talk never meant we were discussing their budget. It meant we were discussing a crisis involving Madison, and how we were all going to pitch in to solve it. I arrived at my parents' house at 5 o'clock sharp. The house was a beautiful, sprawling colonial on the nice side of Graybridge, the kind of house that announced its occupants were stable. Upstanding people, the lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. I walked in, and the atmosphere was thick enough to chew. My father was sitting at the head of the dining table, a stack of folders in front of him. My mother was fluttering near the sideboard, rearranging a bowl of lemons. Madison was sitting opposite Dad, looking radiant and teary-eyed, wearing a silk blouse that I knew cost more than my car payment. "Kennedy, you are here," Mom said, breathless. "Sit down, honey." I sat. I kept my purse in my lap. "What is going on? Is everything okay?" "Everything is wonderful." "Actually," my father said. He clasped his hands on top of the folders. "We have been doing a lot of thinking since your grandmother passed. About legacy, about what she would have wanted." My heart did a strange, stuttering rhythm. "Okay, we know things have been hard for everyone," Dad continued, "and we know that family supports family. That was Edith's way." He looked at Madison, his eyes softening in a way they rarely did when he looked at me. "Madison has been presented with an incredible opportunity, a chance to buy into a boutique marketing firm downtown. It is her chance to finally have something of her own, to build a future." I looked at Madison. She gave me a watery smile. "It is huge. Ken, I finally have a vision. I just need the capital to get in on the ground floor. And that is where the inheritance comes in," my mother said, rushing the words out as if she were afraid I would interrupt. I blinked. "The inheritance? I thought there wasn't one. You said it was simple. You said it was gone." "It was simple," my father said, his voice tightening. "We had to make executive decisions. We decided that the best way to honor your grandmother was to use the funds where they were needed most. We have allocated the estate to cover Madison's buy-in. It is an investment in her future." The room seemed to tilt. I looked from my father's defiant face to my mother's anxious smile, and then to Madison's expectant, pleading eyes. "You allocated it," I repeated, my voice sounding very small in the large room, all of it. "Well, there are always costs," Dad said vaguely, "but the bulk of the liquid assets, yes. We knew you would understand. You are the capable one. Kennedy, you have your job, you have your apartment, you are settled." I sat there, processing the sentence. "You are the capable one." It was the compliment they used to handcuff me. Because I was capable. I did not need. Because I did not need. I could not ask. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "How much are we talking about?" "That is not the point," my father said sharply. "It is the point," I said. "If there was an inheritance, wasn't I named in the will Grandma told me?" I stopped myself. I did not want to bring Mrs. Gable into this. I just want to see the documentation. I said, "Can I see the will? Can I see the accounting?" The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. My mother stopped rearranging the lemons. My father sat back, his face darkening with a familiar, disappointment-laced anger. "Kennedy," he said, his voice low, "do not be selfish." The word struck me like a slap. "Selfish. We are talking about your sister's future," my mother chimed in, her voice trembling. "We are talking about giving her a chance to stand on her own 2 feet. Why does everything have to be a transaction with you? Why can't you just be happy that we can help her?" "I am not trying to be difficult," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I am asking for transparency. If Grandma left money, did she leave it to Madison, or did she leave it to us?" Madison let out a sob. It was a delicate, wounded sound. "I knew you would be like this," she said, wiping her eyes. "I told Mom you would be like this. You think I am a screw-up. You think I do not deserve it. I never said that. I said, you imply it. Madison cried. You sit there with your perfect little life and your judgmental silence. I finally have something to prove. Kennedy, I finally have a chance to show everyone I can do this, and you are worried about what your share. It is not about the money, I said, though I knew as I said it that it sounded like a lie. It is about the fact that nobody told me. You decided for me. We decided as a family, Dad said, slamming his hand down on the table, a flat, final sound. We are the parents. We made the decision that was best for the collective good. If you are going to sit there and demand an audit like some kind of IRS agent, you can leave. I will not have this greed at my table. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the panic behind my mother's eyes. I saw the stubborn pride in my father's jaw. And I saw the triumph hidden deep in Madison's tears, the victory of being the one who needed saving. I stood up. My legs felt numb. I am not being selfish. I said quietly, I am just asking for the truth. I walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently. Stepping out into the cool evening air of Graybridge, I got into my car and drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I did not go straight home. I drove to the park near the river, the one where Grandma used to take me to feed the ducks when I was small. I parked the car and turned off the engine, letting the darkness settle around me. It was not the money. I had told them that, and I meant it. I could pay my rent. I could buy my groceries. But as I sat there, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. I was 26. I had just told Grandma that my husband, my ex-husband, had drained our savings account to buy a motorcycle we could not afford. I was crying in her kitchen, feeling stupid and small. She had made me tea, strong and sweet. She had taken my face in her hands. Her skin smelled like lavender soap and old paper. You carry too much water for people who poke holes in your bucket. Kennedy, she had said, I am fixing it. When I go, I am going to make sure you never have to beg them for security again. You hear me? Never again. I had thought she meant she was leaving me her jewelry, or maybe the antique china cabinet. But now, the memory felt different. It felt like a contract. She made sure you'd be okay. I wiped my face. I was not going to cry over money, but I was done being the geography. The next morning, I called in late to work. I dug the funeral program out of the recycling bin where I had tossed it in a fit of closure. I scanned the back page. Usually, the family lists themselves as the point of contact, but there, in small print at the bottom, Estate Executor Graybridge Trust Estate Services, contact Mr. Arthur Pendleton. My parents were not the executors. I stared at the paper. Why would they lie about the executor if they had allocated the funds? They would have had to do it through the trust office. I dialed the number. Graybridge Trust. This is Sarah. Hi, I said, trying to sound like the project manager I was. Efficient and bored. My name is Kennedy Russell. My grandmother, Edith Russell, passed away recently. I am a beneficiary, and I was hoping to get a copy of the will and the estate summary. There was a pause. The sound of typing. Oh, yes, Ms. Russell. We have the file here. I see your parents were in last week. Yes, I said. They mentioned that. I just need a copy for my own records. Of course. I can mail that out to you today. Thank you. When the packet arrived 2 days later, I sat on my living room floor to open it. It was a thick envelope, but not as thick as I expected. I pulled out the papers. There was a copy of the will. I skipped to the distribution section, to be divided equally between my two granddaughters, Kennedy Ann Russell and Madison Marie Russell, per stirps, equally, 50-50. I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was not left to my parents. It was not left to Madison alone. It was 50-50. I flipped to the accounting summary. This was where it got murky. The total value of the estate was listed, and it was substantial, much more than simple. It was enough to buy a house in Graybridge outright, enough to change a life, but the final distribution line for Kennedy A. Russell was 0. I scanned the line items, my finger tracing the columns, debts paid, funeral costs, administrative fees, and then a line item dated 3 weeks ago, Beneficiary disclaimer, Kate Russell. I froze. A disclaimer. I knew enough about legal terms to know what that meant. It meant I had voluntarily refused the inheritance. It meant I had signed a piece of paper saying, "No thank you. I do not want this money. Please pass it on to the next person." I had not signed a disclaimer. I scrambled through the rest of the packet. Where was the copy of the disclaimer? It wasn't there. The packet seemed to jump from the summary to the tax filings. There were pages missing. I sat back against my sofa. The papers fanned out around me like a losing hand of poker. Maybe I did sign it. The thought whispered in my ear. Insidious and terrifying. The week of the funeral had been a fog. My parents had put so many papers in front of me, cremation authorizations, catering contracts, flower orders. Just sign here. Kennedy, handle this for us. Kennedy. Had I signed away my birthright while trying to pick out the right shade of lilies? I closed my eyes, trying to replay the days. I remembered the smell of the funeral home. I remembered my mother crying about the eulogy. I remembered signing the guest book. I did not remember a legal waiver. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was so desperate to be the good daughter, the helpful one, that I had autopiloted my way into disinheriting myself. I felt a wave of nausea. If I had signed it, then this was all my fault. My parents were right. I was making a big deal out of nothing. I had agreed to this, even if I didn't remember. I stood up and paced the apartment. I needed to calm down. I needed to find something that felt real. I went to my closet and pulled down the shoebox where I kept the things that actually mattered. Old concert tickets, a dried rose from my wedding bouquet that I couldn't quite throw away, and the birthday cards. I found the one from last year. Grandma's handwriting was shaky, the blue ink digging deep into the paper. Happy 31st, my darling. Keep your head up. I am proud of the woman you are. Remember, your share is safe and separate. Do not let them talk you out of your worth. Safe and separate. She had underlined separate. She hadn't just promised me verbally. She had written it down. She knew my parents. She knew Madison. She knew exactly what would happen the moment she was gone. I looked at the card, and then I looked at the estate summary with its zero balance. My grandmother was not a liar, and I was not crazy. If I hadn't signed that disclaimer knowingly, then someone had signed it for me, or someone had tricked me. The nausea shifted into something else, something colder and harder. It felt like the steel of a blade. My parents had called me selfish. They had sat at that table, drunk coffee, and looked me in the eye, telling me I was greedy for asking about money they had stolen. I went to my laptop. I did not search for fraud. I did not search for how to sue your parents. I searched for estate attorney's Graybridge. I skipped the big firms with the billboards on the highway. I looked for someone small, someone precise. I found a website for Harlow Wren Legal Group, the bio for the lead attorney. Elias Wren said he specialized in complex estate litigation and probate disputes. I typed out an email. I deleted it. I typed it again. Dear Mr. Wren, I believe there has been a mistake with my grandmother's estate distribution. I need to understand how a disclaimer works. And if it is possible to sign one without knowing it, I am not looking to start a fight. But I need to know what happened. Sincerely, Kennedy Russell. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. I wasn't doing this for the money. I told myself that again, staring at the screen. I was doing it because Grandma Edith had spent her dying days trying to protect me, and the least I could do was find out why. I looked at my phone. A text from Madison had come in 10 minutes ago. I know you're mad, but please don't ruin this for me. I need you to be my big sister right now. I put the phone face down on the table. I was done being the big sister. I was done being the capable one. For the first time in my life, I was going to be the selfish one. The next morning, the office of Harlow Wren called me back. They had an opening at 2 o'clock. I dressed carefully, a navy blazer, dark jeans, boots, armor. I drove to the address, a brick building in the historic district. As I walked up the steps, I felt a heavy stone of guilt in my stomach. I was walking into a lawyer's office to talk about my parents. I was breaking the code. What happens in the house stays in the house, but the house was built on a lie. I pushed open the door and stepped into the cool, quiet waiting room. The receptionist looked up and smiled. "Kennedy Russell?" she asked. "Yes," I said. My voice did not shake. "That is me." I sat down and waited for the first domino to fall. The office of Elias Wren smelled of lemon polish and old books, a scent that bizarrely reminded me of my grandmother's house, which I took as a sign. The man himself was not what I expected. He was younger than the formidable name suggested, perhaps in his early 40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a stillness to him that felt clinical. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like a surgeon. "Ms. Russell," he said, extending a hand. "Please, come in." I sat in the leather chair opposite his desk. I had brought the packet from the trust office, the funeral program, and the birthday card. I laid them out on the desk like evidence of a crime I wasn't sure had been committed. "Tell me what brings you here," he said, "and don't worry about the legal terms. Just tell me the story." So I did. I told him about the simple estate. I told him about the budget talk. I told him about Madison's business and my parents' accusations of selfishness. I told him about the disclaimer I didn't remember signing. When I finished, he didn't look shocked. He didn't look sympathetic, exactly. He looked focused. He picked up the estate summary and adjusted his glasses. "You are certain you never signed a disclaimer?" he asked. "I don't think so," I said. "But my parents, they handle a lot of things. During the funeral week, I signed a lot of papers. Maybe I missed it." "Mr. Wren nodded slowly. "A disclaimer is a very specific document. Kennedy, it is not something you slip in with a catering contract. It requires a notary. It requires specific language stating that you are irrevocably refusing your interest in the property. It is not a casual thing." He tapped the paper. "If this exists, it has to be filed with the probate court. It is a public record." "Can we see it?" I asked. "We can," he said. He turned to his computer. He typed for a few moments, the clicking of the keys the only sound in the room. I watched his face, looking for a flinch, a frown, anything. He stopped typing. He leaned in closer to the screen. "Here it is," he said softly. "Filed 18 days ago." He turned the monitor so I could see. It was a PDF scan of a document. Disclaimer of interest. There, at the bottom, was a signature. Kennedy A. Russell. I stared at it. The room seemed to lose its air. It looked like my signature, the loop of the K, the sharp cross of the T. It looked exactly like my signature. "See," I whispered, the shame flooding my chest hot and fast. "I did sign it. I must have. I am. I must have been out of my mind with grief. I wasted your time." I started to reach for my purse, desperate to leave, to go home and hide. "Kennedy, look at the date." "Mr. Wren said. His voice was sharp, cutting through my panic. I looked. Dated October 14th. "October 14th, he said. "That was a Tuesday. 2 weeks after the funeral." I frowned. "Tuesday. Where were you on Tuesday?" "October 14th, he asked. I thought back. I checked my mental calendar. That was the day of the quarterly review at work. I had been in a conference room from 8 in the morning until 5. I hadn't seen my parents. I hadn't seen a notary. I was at work. I said, "All day. And look at the notary stamp." "Mr. Wren continued. He zoomed in on the image. "State of Franklin. County of Mercer. Mercer County is 3 hours south of here." "Mr. Wren said, "Did you go to Mercer County on that Tuesday?" "No." I said, "I have never been to Mercer County." "Mr. Wren turned the monitor back to face him. He looked at me, and for the first time, his expression held a flicker of something dark. "Then you didn't sign this, Kennedy." "But it looks like my signature," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He folded his hands. "It is very easy to trace a signature if you have a sample, and it is very easy to find a notary who will stamp a document without the person present, if you know the right people, or if you pay them." He let the silence hang there. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This is forgery. And if the funds have already been distributed based on this document, it is theft." I sat back in the chair. I felt physically ill. My parents, my father, who insisted on polished shoes and perfect table manners. My mother, who worried about what the neighbors thought of her garden. They hadn't just bullied me, they hadn't just guilt-tripped me, they had erased me. They used my name to steal from my grandmother. I said, the realization tasting like ash, to give it to Madison. Mr. Wren watched me carefully. I need you to listen to me very closely. This is an inflection point. If we pursue this, it is not going to be a polite conversation. You are accusing your parents of a felony. I know, I said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. We need to send a formal demand for the original records. He said, we need to preserve the evidence before it disappears. Do you want me to do that? I thought about the family dinner. I thought about the selfish comment. I thought about Madison's tears. And then I thought about Grandma Edith, dying in that hospital bed, trying to tell me she had built me a life raft. My parents had sunk the raft. Yes, I said. Do it, Mr. Wren picked up his pen. Okay, he said. Let's get to work. I walked out of the office an hour later. The sun was setting over Graybridge, casting long, distorted shadows down the street. I felt different, heavier, but solid. I took my phone out. I had a missed call from my mother. Call me. Honey, we're looking at storefronts for Madison. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't call back. I had a secret now, too. And mine was going to cost them a lot more than money. The office of Harlow Wren was quiet, insulated from the noise of the street below by thick panes of glass and shelves lined with legal texts that looked like they had not been moved in decades. I sat across from Elias Wren, watching him organize a stack of documents with the precision of a card dealer. We need to talk about the mechanics of this. Kennedy, Elias said. He did not use legal jargon to intimidate me. He used it to clarify, peeling back the layers of the mystery until the machinery of the fraud was exposed. He picked up a pen and drew a simple diagram on a legal pad. A circle for my grandmother, 2 lines branching down to my sister and me. In a standard distribution, the assets flow down, he said, tracing the lines. If a beneficiary does not want the assets, say, for tax reasons, or because they are independently wealthy, they can refuse them. That is what a disclaimer is. It is a formal refusal. He looked up at me. When you sign a disclaimer, you are telling the court that you are treating the inheritance as if you had predeceased the testator. You are stepping out of the line of succession. And when I step out, I asked, feeling the cold logic of it, where does the money go? It flows to the next beneficiary in line, Elias said. Or, if the will specifies, it is redistributed to the remaining beneficiaries. In this case, if you step out, your share does not go to your children, because you have none. It flows sideways. It absorbs into the residue of the estate, which goes to Madison. I said, exactly, Elias said. This is the only way your parents could have legally moved the money to your sister without your direct involvement in a bank transfer. If you had accepted the money, you would have had to write a check to Madison. That leaves a trail. It requires your active participation. A disclaimer that just requires a signature. It is cleaner. It is a quiet removal of an obstacle. I stared at the diagram. I was the obstacle. Elias leaned back in his chair. To build this case, I need to understand the communication leading up to this. I need you to go home and find every email, every text message, every voicemail where your parents discussed the estate. We need to establish a pattern of intent. If they pressured you, or if they misled you about the value of the estate, that is evidence. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. I can do that. But later that night, sitting on the floor of my living room with my laptop open and my phone plugged in, the determination turned into a hollow, aching realization. I searched my email for estate. Nothing. I searched for inheritance. Nothing. I searched for grandma. Just threads about the funeral flowers and a recipe for lemon bars my mother had sent 2 years ago. I checked my text messages. There were hundreds of messages from my mother, but they were all logistical. Dinner at 5. Did you pick up the dry cleaning? Dad needs help with the iPad. There was nothing about money, nothing about the will. I sat back, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. I realized with a sudden, sharp clarity. Why my parents always called. It is more personal to hear your voice. Kennedy, my mother would say whenever I tried to confirm plans via text. Don't be so cold. Just pick up the phone. I had always thought it was a generational quirk, a desire for connection. I had felt guilty about it, chiding myself for being too busy to chat. Now, I saw it for what it was. It was hygiene. They never wrote anything down. They never left a trail. Every conversation about the estate, the simple estate, the budget talk, the allocation, had happened verbally. It was their word against mine. They had been managing the narrative in the air, where it could vanish the moment the words were spoken. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. It wasn't just opportunistic, it was architectural. They had built this silence around me for years. The next day, I went back to Elias's office. I had nothing to give him but my own memory. I don't have anything, I told him, hating the tremor in my voice. They call me. They always call me. Elias did not look surprised. He just nodded. That is common in these situations, he said. It makes it harder, but not impossible, because while they can avoid emails, they cannot avoid the court. He slid a folder across the desk. I pulled the official probate file this morning, he said. This is not the partial packet the trust office sent you. This is the certified record from the courthouse. I opened the folder. On top was the disclaimer. Seeing it in the high contrast black and white of a certified photocopy was different than seeing it on a screen. It looked official. It looked final. My name was printed in the center. Kennedy Ann Russell, and below it, the signature. I traced the curve of the K with my finger. It was a good forgery, a terrifyingly good forgery. It had the same slight slant I had used since high school. But Elias pointed to the bottom of the page again, to the notary stamp. We talked about the date. He said, October 14th. You were at work. But look closer at the stamp. I squinted at the seal. Linda K., Vance, Notary Public, Mercer County. I ran a background check on Linda K. Vance, Elias said, his voice flat and factual. She is not a random notary. She is a former administrative assistant who used to work at your father's insurance firm 10 years ago. She lives 3 hours away, my father's firm. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just a stranger. It was a favor. My father had called in a favor to erase me. This is not a mistake, Kennedy, Elias said gently. This is a conspiracy. They drafted the document. They forged your signature. And they found someone willing to stamp it without you present. I closed the folder. I felt like I was going to throw up. What do? I asked. Elias looked at me. You have 2 choices. We can file a petition with the court immediately, alleging fraud. That will trigger an investigation. It will freeze the assets. It will likely lead to criminal charges against the notary and potentially your parents. He paused. Or, you can give them one chance to fix it. I drove to my parents' house on a Tuesday evening. The sky was a bruised purple. Threatening rain. I hadn't told them I was coming. I knew if I called, they would manage the conversation. They would set the stage. I parked my car on the street, not in the driveway. I wanted to be able to leave. When I walked up the driveway, I saw the warm glow of the lamps in the living room. It looked so normal. It was the house where I had learned to ride a bike, the house where I had cried over prom dates. It was the set of a movie I had been starring in my whole life, and I was just now realizing the script had been rewritten without me. I knocked. My father opened the door. He was wearing his reading glasses and a cardigan. He looked like the picture of a kindly patriarch. Kennedy, he said, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face before he smoothed it into a smile. We weren't expecting you. Is everything okay? I need to talk to you. I said, and Mom, he hesitated, blocking the doorway for a fraction of a second. Before stepping back, come in. My mother was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. When she saw me, she froze. Her eyes darted to my father's face, reading the barometer of his mood. Kennedy, she said, do you want some tea? No. I said. I stood in the center of the kitchen, refusing to sit. I did not want to be comfortable. I went to the trust office. I said. The silence that followed was heavy and instant. My father took off his glasses and folded them slowly. "Why would you do that?" "Kennedy," he asked. "We told you we were handling it. I requested the file." I continued, my voice shaking, despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "I found a document I didn't sign. A disclaimer." My mother made a small, distressed sound. "Oh, Kennedy, it has my signature on it," I said, looking directly at my father. "But I didn't sign it. The notary is a woman named Linda Vance. She used to work for you." "Dad." My father's face turned a shade of red I associated with traffic jams and poor customer service. He set his glasses down on the counter with a sharp click. "So that is what this is about," he said. "You are digging around, looking for dirt. You are listening to some lawyer who wants a cut of the money, aren't you?" "I am not digging for dirt," I said. "I am looking for the truth." "Dad, that is a forged document. That is a crime. Don't you use that word in this house," he snapped. He took a step toward me, his finger raised. "You have no idea what you are talking about. We did what was necessary to facilitate the estate. The paperwork is just a formality." "Just a formality?" I asked, incredulous. "You signed my name." "You stole my inheritance. We protected the family," he shouted. The veneer of the kindly patriarch vanished, replaced by the bully I had spent my childhood tiptoeing around. "Madison needed that money now," he said. "Not in 6 months. Not after probate dragged on. We had to expedite things. You were grieving. You were emotional. We made an executive decision. You don't get to make executive decisions about my life," I said, "or my rights." "You are being so dramatic," my mother interjected, her voice shrill. "Just like you were with the divorce, always the victim. Kennedy, we were going to make it right eventually. We just needed to move the capital. Why can't you trust us?" "Because you lied to me," I yelled. The sound of my own voice startled me. I never yelled. I took a breath, lowering my volume. "I am giving you a chance," I said. I wanted to offer them an out. I wanted to believe that if I cornered them, they would break down and apologize, that they would fix it. "Tell the trust office there was a mistake," I said, unwinding the transaction. "Put the money back. If you do that, I won't file the petition. I won't tell the court about Linda Vance." My father laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. "You aren't going to tell the court anything," he said, "because you aren't going to destroy your sister's life over a clerical technicality. You aren't that selfish. Kennedy, I know you." He looked at me with a terrifying confidence. He was banking on my training. He was banking on the 32 years of conditioning that told me to swallow my anger to keep the peace. "Go home." "Kennedy," he said, "stop this nonsense before you embarrass yourself." I looked at my mother. She looked down at the counter. Refusing to meet my eyes, I turned and walked out. I didn't say goodbye. I drove home in a daze, the rain finally breaking, hammering against the windshield. They hadn't denied it. They hadn't even apologized. They had just reframed the reality I was the aggressor. I was the threat. My phone rang at 11:30 that night. It was Madison. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. I knew what was coming. "Hello, you are ruining everything," she screamed. There was no preamble. She was hysterical, her voice jagged with tears. "Madison," I said, rubbing my temples. "Mom just called me." She sobbed. "She said you are threatening to sue them, that you are trying to put Dad in jail. How could you?" "Kennedy over money." "It is not about the money," I said, the mantra feeling worn out in my mouth. "They forged my signature. Madison. They committed fraud." "Who cares?" she shrieked. "It is just paper. We are family. I needed that money." "Kennedy, I have a vision. I have a plan." "You always have a plan," I said quietly, "and I always pay for it." "That is not fair," she cried. "You are just jealous because for once, Mom and Dad are betting on me. You can't stand that I am the one succeeding." "Succeeding?" I asked. "With stolen money I already spent it." She blurted out. The line went silent. "What?" I asked. "I spent the deposit," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I signed the lease on the studio space. I put down $50,000. If the money gets frozen, I lose the deposit. I lose the contract. I lose everything." She started to cry again. A pathetic, hiccuping sound. Please, Ken, please don't do this. If you pull the plug, I am dead. The penalties. I can't afford the penalties. I listened to her cry. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I felt a clinical detachment. Madison was not a victim. She was a co-conspirator who was happy to benefit from the crime as long as she didn't have to hold the weapon. My parents' identity was built on being the providers, the good parents who rescued their children. Madison's identity was the fragile dreamer who needed rescuing. And my identity? I was the buffer. I was the insulation. I was the one who absorbed the shock so the structure wouldn't collapse. If I refused to absorb this, the whole house would come down. I can't help you. Madison, I said, you are a bitch. She spat. A cold, heartless bitch. I hung up. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The guilt was there, a heavy blanket, but underneath it was something sharper, anger, pure, distilled anger. I finally fell asleep around 3 a.m. I was woken up at 7 by the ping of an email notification on my phone. I rolled over, groggy, and squinted at the screen. It was an email from an address I didn't recognize. Truth. Seeker 882. Some generic email address. The subject line was blank. I opened it. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment. A PDF. I sat up and opened the attachment. It was a scan of a bank wire transfer confirmation. Date October 20th. From Graybridge Trust Estate Services to Russell Joint Checking Account. Amount $325,000. I stared at the screen. The money hadn't gone to Madison. My parents had said they allocated the money to Madison. Madison said she had spent the deposit, but the wire transfer showed the money going directly into my parents' personal joint checking account. If the money went to them, why did Madison have to beg for it? And if Madison had spent $50,000 on a deposit, where was the rest of it? $325,000 was a lot of money. Even with a $50,000 gift to Madison, that left nearly $300,000 unaccounted for. My parents weren't just redirecting the money to help Madison. They were skimming it, or they were hoarding it. The narrative of supporting the family was a lie. The money had hit their account and stayed there, or gone somewhere else entirely. I thought about the anonymous sender. Who had access to this bank? Employee, a paralegal at the trust office. Then I remembered my cousin, Ben. He worked in compliance at the regional bank my parents used. We weren't close, but we were friendly. He had been at the funeral, looking uncomfortable while my father loudly pontificated about politics. I couldn't ask him. That would put him at risk. But someone knew. Someone was watching. I called Elias immediately. I need to see you. I said, I got an email. When I showed him the scan an hour later, his face went grim. This changes things, he said. This isn't just about cutting you out to help your sister. This is conversion of funds. Your parents took the money into their own possession. He looked at me over his glasses. Kennedy, you need to understand the gravity of this. If we proceed with a formal records request and file the fraud petition, we are alleging that your parents stole over $300,000. That is a first-degree felony. If the court refers this to the district attorney, your parents could go to prison. Prison. The word hung in the air like smoke. I thought about my father in an orange jumpsuit. I thought about my mother, who was afraid of thunderstorms, sitting in a cell. I don't want them in prison. I whispered, then you have a very difficult decision to make. Elias said, if you want the truth, and if you want your inheritance back, you have to apply pressure, and pressure in the legal system looks like criminal exposure. You cannot half-sue someone for fraud. I stood up and walked to the window. Graybridge looked small and gray below me. If I did nothing, I accepted the lie. I accepted that I was a non-person, a signature to be forged, a resource to be harvested. I accepted that my grandmother's last wish for me, her protection, meant nothing. But if I fought, I became the executioner of my own family. I closed my eyes. I saw Grandma Edith's face. Safe and separate. She knew. She must have known they would do this. That was why she underlined separate. I turned back to Elias. I don't want to file the petition yet. I said, not today. He looked disappointed. Kennedy. But, I continued, my voice hardening. I want to send a formal letter, a demand letter. I want to put them on notice. I want to tell them that we know about the forgery, we know about the wire transfer, and we know about the notary. I want to give them one chance to settle this before we file, but I want the terms to be mine. Elias nodded slowly. That is a valid strategy. A pre-litigation settlement demand. It fires a warning shot. And one more thing. I said, I pulled out my phone. I blocked my parents' numbers. I blocked Madison's number. From now on, I said, no more phone calls. No more personal talks. If they want to speak to me, they write it down. Elias typed a note on his computer. Written communication only. Good. I walked out of the office. I felt cold, but it was a clean cold. The fog was gone. I sat in my car and composed one final text to my father before the block took effect. I am not the selfish one. I am the one with the proof. All future communication goes through my attorney or in writing. If you want to stop what is coming, tell the truth. I hit send. Then I blocked him. I drove home in silence. The silence wasn't expensive anymore. It was necessary. It was the sound of the bridge burning behind me, lighting the way forward. The response from the trust office arrived on a Thursday, carried in a thick cream-colored envelope that looked too polite for the violence it contained. I sat in Elias Wren's office, watching him read it. He was a man who read with his whole body, his posture stiffening as his eyes scanned down the page. They are circling the wagons, Elias said, tossing the letter onto his desk. What does that mean? I asked. It means they are claiming they acted in good faith, he said. He tapped the letter. They admit that the disclaimer was processed, but they are claiming they relied on your parents as the authorized family representatives. They say your parents provided the documents, and they had no reason to doubt their authenticity. But I am an adult. I said, I am 32 years old. Why would they accept my parents' word for my signature? Because of this, Elias said. He pulled a second document from the file, a photocopy that looked grainy and old. It was a durable power of attorney document. I squinted at it. It was dated 4 years ago. It named my father, Robert Russell, as the agent for my grandmother, Edith Russell. I remember this, I said slowly. Grandma signed this when she broke her hip. It was supposed to be for emergencies, in case she went into a coma or couldn't pay her bills. Elias nodded. That is what they are usually for. But look at the language here. It grants your father broad powers, banking, real estate management. And the trust office is arguing that because your father had this power while she was alive, they deferred to him during the transition of the estate. They are saying he was the captain of the ship, and they just followed his orders. But Grandma is dead. I said, power of attorney ends at death. It does, Elias said. But the influence doesn't. Your father used this document to establish himself as the voice of authority with the trust office long before she died. He groomed them. He made them used to taking his instructions. So when he handed them a disclaimer with your name on it, they didn't blink. They just stamped it. I felt a cold shiver run through me. It wasn't just a theft of opportunity. It was a long game. I looked at the date on the power of attorney again. 4 years ago. Suddenly, I was back in the hospital room. It was 3 days before she died. The room smelled of antiseptic and dying flowers. The machines were humming, a rhythmic, mechanical breathing that filled the silence. I was sitting by the bed, holding Grandma's hand. Her skin felt like parchment, dry and terrifyingly thin. She had opened her eyes. They were milky, unfocused, but then they locked onto mine with a sudden, desperate clarity. Kennedy, she had whispered. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. The paper. Check the paper. I had leaned in. What paper? Grandma. The will he has. She wheezed. He has the book. Don't let him. She tried to squeeze my hand. I tried to change it. I tried. Then the door had opened. My mother had walked in, bringing a gust of fresh air and aggressive cheerfulness. "Well, look who is awake," Mom had chirped, her voice too loud for the small room. "How are we doing? Mom Kennedy? Let her rest. You are agitating her." Grandma's hand had gone limp in mine. She looked at my mother, and I saw it now. I saw what I hadn't seen then. It wasn't fatigue, it was fear. She closed her eyes and turned her head away. She is just tired. I had told myself. She is confused. I came back to the present, the leather chair in Elias's office feeling sticky against my back. She tried to tell me. I whispered. She knew Dad was using the power of attorney to maneuver things. She tried to stop it. Elias watched me. Grief is a heavy thing, Kennedy, but we have to use it. If they used the power of attorney to refinance or move assets before she died, that is not just estate fraud, that is elder abuse. He turned back to his computer. I did some digging into the public records regarding your parents' property. He said, I wanted to see where the money might have gone. If they didn't give it to Madison immediately, they put it somewhere. He clicked a few keys and turned the screen toward me. It was a property title search for my parents' house, the house on Elm Street, the house with the manicured lawn and the perfect shutters. There was a lien recorded against the property. Lien holder Apex Private Lending. Amount $280,000. Date recorded. 6 months ago. I stared at the numbers. What is this? I asked. It is a hard money loan. Elias said. High interest. Short term. Usually a last resort for people who can't get a traditional bank loan. My parents. I shook my head. No. My father is obsessed with credit scores. He lectures me about fiscal responsibility every Christmas. They own that house. They paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. They did, Elias said. And then, 6 months ago, they took out this loan. And look at the status. He pointed to a line in red. Notice of default filed October 1st. October 1st, the day after the funeral. They were in foreclosure, Elias said calmly, or about to be. They borrowed nearly $300,000 from a predatory lender, and they couldn't pay it back. They were going to lose the house. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs in a rush. It wasn't for Madison. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The whole story, the business opportunity, the helping family, the moralizing about Madison's future, it was all a cover. They stole the inheritance to pay off their own secret debt. They framed me as selfish. I said, my voice trembling with a rage that felt hot and white. They told me I was greedy for wanting my share, and all the while, they were stealing it to save their own house. They used Madison as the human shield. Elias said, it is a classic deflection. If they said they needed the money for themselves, they would have to admit they failed. They would have to admit they are broke. But if they say it is for your sister, then they are heroes, and you are the villain for standing in the way. I thought about Madison. I thought about her crying on the phone, terrified about her deposit. Does Madison know? I asked. I don't know, Elias said. But if the money went to the lien, it didn't go to her. I left the office with a copy of the lien in my purse. It felt heavy, like carrying a stone. I drove to the bank where my cousin Ben worked. I hadn't called him. I didn't want a digital trail. I just walked into the branch downtown and sat in the waiting area until he came out of his glass-walled office. When he saw me, his face went pale. He looked around quickly, checking to see if anyone was watching. Kennedy, he said, keeping his voice low. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Ben, off the record? He hesitated, then checked his watch. Take a walk with me. We walked out to the parking lot. Standing near his car, the wind was whipping dead leaves across the asphalt. I know about the wire, I said. I know it went to their account. Not Madison's. Ben rubbed the back of his neck. He looked miserable. Kennedy, I can't. I could lose my job. I am not asking you to give me documents. I said, I just need to understand. I found a lien. Ben, a hard money loan. Did they use the inheritance to pay it off? Ben sighed. He looked at the ground. The wire came in on the 20th, he said quietly. $325,000. On the 21st, a cashier's check was cut for $290,000, payable to Apex Lending. I closed my eyes. There it was, the smoking gun. And Madison, I asked? Ben grimaced. They transferred $25,000 to her account the next day. Not the 50 she talked about. 25? So she lied too. I said, or they lied to her. Ben said, look, Kennedy, your dad, he was in here every day that week. He was sweating. He looked like a man who was about to be executed. He kept saying, I just need to clear the ledger. I just need to clear the ledger. He was clearing his own ledger with my money. I said, Ben looked at me with genuine pity. I am sorry. Ken, I really am. When I saw the transaction, it didn't sit right. That is why I sent you the email. I touched his arm. Thank you. Ben, you have no idea what that means to me. I drove home, my mind racing. I had the how. I had the where. Now I needed the why of Madison. Why was she so desperate? Why did she lie about the deposit amount I didn't have to wait long to find out? I pulled into my apartment complex and saw a silver Audi parked in my spot. Madison. She was leaning against the hood, smoking a cigarette. I hadn't seen her smoke in 5 years. She looked wrecked. Her makeup was smeared, and she was wearing sweatpants, which for Madison was the equivalent of wearing a distress beacon. I parked in a visitor spot and walked over. I didn't feel the old protective urge. I felt a wary caution. You blocked me, she said. She didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded defeated. I did. I said, I told you, written communication only. I can't write this down, she said. She took a drag of the cigarette, her hand shaking. I unlocked my front door. Come in, but I'm recording this. She didn't argue. She followed me inside and collapsed onto my sofa. I know they kept the money, she said. I stood by the kitchen island, keeping distance between us. You do, Dad told me. After you left that night, he said they were in trouble. He said they would pay me the rest later. He gave me $25,000 to hold off the wolves. Who are the wolves? Madison, I asked. Who is this partner? She put her head in her hands. It is not a partner. Kennedy. It is a guy I met in Miami. His name is Silas. He fronts money for startups. A loan shark, I asked. An investor, she corrected. But her voice lacked conviction. I signed a contract. I guaranteed $50,000 up front for the build-out. If I didn't pay by the first of the month, the equity clause kicks in. He takes 80% of the business. And there are penalties. Personal penalties. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide and terrified. He knows where I live. Ken. He knows where Mom and Dad live. I needed that money to be true. I didn't ask where it came from because I couldn't afford to care. If Dad said he had it, I believed him. So you let them throw me under the bus, I said. You let them call me selfish. You let them forge my signature. Because you were scared of Silas. Yes, she whispered. I am sorry. I was just so scared. I looked at her. She was 30 years old. But she was still a child. My parents had crippled her. They had bailed her out of every mistake, hidden every consequence, until she was incapable of surviving reality. And now, they were drowning, and they had pulled her down with them, and they tried to pull me down too. I need you to leave, I said. Kennedy, please. I mean it. Madison, I can't fix this for you. You signed a contract with a dangerous man. That is your reality. My reality is that our parents stole my inheritance to pay for a house they couldn't afford. I opened the door. She stood up, wiping her face. You are so cold, she said. No. I said, I am just clear. After she left, I sat in the silence. It wasn't expensive anymore. It was heavy with the weight of truth. I called Elias. I am ready, I said. The next morning, I was back in his office. We sat at the conference table. The evidence spread out between us. The forged disclaimer, the lien, the wire transfer record Ben had verbally confirmed, the notes on Madison's situation. We have enough for a criminal referral. Elias said, we could go to the district attorney today. We could freeze their accounts. We could put a lis pendens on the house. I looked at the options. If I went to the DA, my father would likely go to prison. He had committed forgery and grand larceny. My mother was an accessory. Madison would be left to the mercy of her investor. The family would be detonated, and I would be the girl who put her parents in jail. Graybridge was a small city. I would never outrun that headline. I don't want the spectacle, I said. I don't want to testify in a criminal trial. I don't want to be the reason my mother dies in a cell. Then what do you want? Elias asked. I want my life back. I said, I want my name cleared. I want the money returned. And I want them to admit it. I pulled a notepad toward me. We are going to draft a settlement, I said. A demand package. The paper. Elias nodded, uncapping his pen. Okay, walk me through it. First, I said, we draft the petition for probate fraud. We write it all out. The forgery, the notary, the wire transfer, the lien. We attach the evidence. We make it ready to file. Exhibit A, Elias said, writing it down. Second, I continued, we write a demand letter. We lay out exactly what we know. We tell them that we are prepared to file the petition in 72 hours, and the terms Elias asked. Full repayment of my share, I said, plus interest, plus legal fees. They don't have the cash. Elias reminded me. They just paid off the lien. Then they sell the house. I said, my voice didn't waver. They sell the house, or they take out a legitimate mortgage, or they sell the cars. I don't care how they do it, but they pay me. And a confession. I said, I want a signed document, notarized by a notary of my choosing, admitting that they forged my signature and misappropriated the funds. Elias raised an eyebrow. That is a hard pill to swallow. That is a confession of a crime. It will be confidential. I said, a private settlement agreement. If they pay, and if they sign, I don't file the petition. The confession stays in your safe. But if they ever lie about me again, or if they ever try to claim I gifted them the money, I pull it out. Insurance, Elias said. Exactly. We spent the next 3 days drafting. It was grueling work. Every sentence had to be perfect. Every accusation had to be backed by the exhibits. It was a weapon. I was building a bomb, and I was going to hand it to them and tell them to defuse it. But while I was building my weapon, they were launching their missiles. It started with a call from my Aunt Carol. I let it go to voicemail. Kennedy, I heard what is going on. I can't believe you would attack your parents like this. After everything they have done for you, your mother is sick with worry. She says you are having a breakdown. Please, honey, call us. We can get you help. Then a text from my cousin Sarah, not Ben. Really. Ken. Trying to sue the family. Mom says the divorce messed you up. But this is low. Money isn't everything. They were spinning the narrative. They were telling the family that I was unstable, that I was money-obsessed, that I was the aggressor. They were isolating me. They knew that if they turned the tribe against me, I would cave. That was how it always worked. The fear of exile was their greatest leverage. I sat in my apartment, listening to the voicemails, feeling the walls close in. I felt small. I felt like the little girl who was told she was selfish for wanting a second scoop of ice cream. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe I should just let it go. Was it worth destroying the family over money? I went to my therapy appointment on Friday feeling like I was made of glass. I feel like I am the villain in my own life. I told Dr. Aris, they are all saying I am broken. Doctor. Aris looked at me calm and steady. Kennedy, imagine you are a bank, she said. I blinked. What? Imagine you are a bank, and someone walks in and robs you. They take everything in the vault. And then, when you call the police, the robber stands outside and tells everyone. Can you believe how greedy that bank is? They want their money back. They are obsessed with money. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. That sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Doctor, Aris said, but that is what they are doing. They robbed you. Kennedy, not just of money, but of your agency. They used your name. They stole your identity. And now they are using social pressure to make you feel like the criminal for asking for restitution. She leaned forward. You are not unstable. You are reacting normally to an abnormal situation. You are the only person in that family who is operating in reality. I left the session feeling a little less like glass and a little more like steel. I called my friend Maya. We hadn't talked in a few weeks because I had been hiding in my hole of shame. "Hey," I said, "can we get dinner? I need to tell you something crazy." We met at a Thai place downtown. I told her everything. I told her about the forgery, the lien, the gaslighting. Maya didn't tell me I was selfish. She didn't tell me to make peace. She slammed her hand on the table. "That is biblical," she said, her eyes blazing. "That is straight-up villainy. Kennedy, if you need a place to stay, you have my keys. If you need someone to egg their house, I am there." I laughed, and this time it was real. "I don't need eggs," I said. "I have a lawyer. But thank you." I looked around the table. Maya, Dr. Aris, Elias, Ben. I had a new team. It wasn't the family I was born into. It was the people who dealt in truth. My parents had relied on the old system, the system where blood meant silence, the system where "don't be selfish" was a command to accept abuse. I was breaking the system. On Monday morning, Elias called me. "The package is ready," he said. "The demand letter, the draft petition, the settlement agreement, the paper. How do you want to deliver it?" he asked. "We can send a process server." "No," I said. I thought about the family budget talk. I thought about how they had invited me into their home to lie to my face. "I am going to give it to them." I said. "Are you sure?" Elias asked. "That is volatile." "I have to." I said. "They need to see me. They need to see that I am not the daughter they created. They need to see the woman they robbed. There is a family gathering this weekend." I said. "For Labor Day. Everyone will be there. Aunt Carol, the cousins, Madison. I am going to go, and I am going to serve them." The Labor Day weekend in Graybridge was always the same. The air turned a specific shade of gold that signaled the end of summer. The humidity finally broke, and my parents hosted a barbecue that was less a celebration and more a theatrical production of the American dream. I drove toward their house with a feeling in my stomach that was no longer dread. It was something colder. It was the clinical detachment of a coroner arriving at a crime scene. I had spent the last 3 days preparing for this. I wasn't going there to fight. I wasn't going there to scream or flip tables. I was going to observe. I needed to see them one last time through the lens of what I now knew, before I handed them the document that would sever the timeline of our family into before and after. The investigation had moved fast since my meeting with Elias. 2 days ago, I had walked into the Graybridge Trust Estate Services office. I didn't make an appointment. I just walked in, wearing my work blazer and carrying a folder that contained nothing but a blank legal pad. I wanted them to think I had more than I did. Mr. Pendleton, the head of the office, wasn't there. That was lucky. Instead, I sat across from a junior trust officer named Sarah, the woman who had first mailed me the incomplete packet. She looked terrified. Her hands kept smoothing the fabric of her skirt. "I know about the disclaimer." "Sarah," I had said, keeping my voice very low, "I know I didn't sign it, and I know my father pressured this office to accept it." She had glanced at the open door, then leaned in. "Ms. Russell, please." "I just processed the paperwork. There is a paper trail." I said, "If this goes to court, and it will, the discovery process will uncover every email and every internal note. If you had concerns, and you didn't document them, you are liable. But if you did raise a concern—" She bit her lip. "I told Mr. Pendleton," she whispered. "When your father brought the disclaimer in, the signature looked shaky, and the notary stamp was from out of county. I asked if we should call you to verify. Standard procedure is to call the beneficiary, and I asked, Mr. Pendleton told me not to bother." She said, "He said your father was the designated family representative. He said we didn't need to bog down the process with red tape. He told me to file it. Did you write that down?" I asked. She nodded slowly. I put a note in the digital file. Per instruction from a P. Verification waived. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That note was the difference between negligence and conspiracy. "Can you give me a copy?" I asked. She shook her head, her eyes wide. "I can't. I would lose my job. But if I get subpoenaed, you will tell the truth." I finished. She nodded. I left the trust office with the confirmation I needed. But Elias had called me an hour later with something worse. They sent over a new document. "Kennedy," Elias had said, his voice tight. "It is a family meeting summary." "What is that?" I asked. "It is a typed document, dated 3 days after the funeral. It claims that a meeting took place at your parents' home, attended by you, your parents, and Madison. It lists a bullet point: Kennedy Russell voluntarily waives inheritance rights in favor of Madison Russell to support family business ventures." I gripped the phone. "That meeting never happened." "I know," Elias said. "But here's the kicker. It is notarized." "Linda Vance again?" I asked. "No," Elias said. "A different notary, someone local, and it is signed by your parents and Madison, not you. But they are submitting it to the trust office to bolster their claim that the disclaimer was just the administrative execution of a verbal contract. They are building a narrative history. Kennedy, they are manufacturing consent." That was the thought that replayed in my head as I pulled into my parents' driveway. They are manufacturing consent. The driveway was full. My Aunt Carol's minivan was there, my cousin Ben's sedan, a few other cars belonging to neighbors. The party was in full swing. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. I put on my sunglasses. I walked into the backyard. The smell of charcoal and sweet barbecue sauce hit me instantly. It was the scent of my childhood. My father was at the grill, wearing a novelty apron that said "The Grill Father." He was laughing at something Uncle Jerry said, holding a beer. He looked so relaxed. He looked like a man who wasn't currently defrauding his daughter of $300,000. When he saw me, his smile faltered for a microsecond, a glitch in the transmission, before resetting to full brightness. "Kennedy." "You made it," he boomed. He walked over, arms open. He hugged me. I stood stiffly, letting him wrap his arms around me. He smelled of hickory smoke and expensive cologne. "Glad you could make it, kiddo," he whispered in my ear. "I knew you would come around. We are family." He thought I was there to surrender. He thought the silence of the last week was me licking my wounds, accepting my place. I pulled away. "Hi, Dad. I made your favorites," he said, gesturing to the grill. "Burgers are almost done. Grab a drink." I walked past him toward the cooler. I felt eyes on me. I saw Aunt Carol whispering to my mother near the potato salad. My mother looked frail. She was wearing a floral dress that seemed to hang off her, and her smile was plastered on with tension. "Kennedy," Carol called out. Her voice was too loud. "We were just saying how hard the divorce must be on you. You look so thin." "I am fine, Aunt Carol," I said. "I am actually doing really well. I saw Ben standing by the fence. He gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. He was the only other person here who knew the house was built on quicksand. I found Madison sitting on a lounge chair, wearing oversized sunglasses and sipping a vodka lemonade. She didn't look up when I approached. "We need to talk," I said. "Not here," she hissed. "Inside," I said. 5 minutes. I walked into the house. It was cool and dark, the air conditioning humming. I went into the den, my father's sanctuary. The walls were lined with books he hadn't read, and framed photos of us on vacations we couldn't afford. I sat in the leather chair. A moment later, Madison slipped in and closed the door. She looked worse than she had in the parking lot. Her skin was sallow. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Mom said you were going to sue us." "I am still deciding," I said. Madison paced the small room. "You can't. You really can't. Tell me about the lease." "Madison," I said. She stopped pacing. She looked at me, confusion clouding her face. "The lease. You told me you needed the money for a deposit on a business." I said, "But Dad used the money to pay off a lien on this house. So where does your deposit fit in?" Madison sank onto the ottoman. She pulled her knees up to her chest. "It wasn't a new deposit," she whispered. "It was an old one." What do you mean? I signed the lease for the studio 6 months ago, she said. Before Grandma died. I didn't tell anyone. I thought I could make it work. I used my credit cards to pay the first few months. But then, the business didn't launch. I didn't have clients. I defaulted. She looked at the floor. The landlord was going to sue me. He had a personal guarantee. He was going to garnish my wages. I went to Dad. I told him I was in trouble. And what did Dad say I asked? He said he would fix it, Madison said. He said Grandma was sick, and that when she passed, there would be money. He told me to stall the landlord. I stared at her. My parents had known for months. They had been planning the allocation of the estate before Grandma was even cold. So the inheritance wasn't a gift. I said, it was a bailout. It was a rescue. Madison corrected, her voice defensive. Dad said we couldn't let the family look like failures. If I got sued, it would be public record. Everyone in Graybridge would know. It is always about the image. I said. Madison looked up, tears streaking her face. He paid the landlord. Kennedy. He used $25,000 to settle the back rent and break the lease. That is where my share went. The rest. I don't know where the rest went. I know where it went. I said, it went to save this house. Madison blinked. What, they were in foreclosure? Madison. They used Grandma's money to pay off a secret loan they took out on this house. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She didn't know. They had played her, too. They had let her believe she was the primary cause of the crisis, the one who needed saving, when in reality, she was just a small leak in a sinking ship. They lied to you, I said softly. They used your crisis to justify stealing my share. They told themselves they were helping you, so they didn't have to admit they were helping themselves. Madison put her head in her hands. I just wanted to do something real. She sobbed. I just wanted to prove I could do it. You can't build a future on a lie. I said. I stood up. I needed to find my mother. I walked out of the den. But as I passed the desk in the hallway, the old oak roll top where the family computer lived, I paused. The computer was on. The screensaver was bouncing bubbles around a black void. It was the shared family PC, the one everyone used to print boarding passes or check recipes. I touched the mouse. The screen woke up. It was logged into my father's email account. He never logged out. I knew I shouldn't look. It was an invasion of privacy. But they had invaded my entire life. I clicked on the search bar. I typed Pendleton. A list of emails appeared, dozens of them. I clicked on one dated 2 months ago. Subject RE Estate, Preparation. From Robert Russell to Arthur Pendleton. Arthur. Regarding the distribution options we discussed, I need assurance that the transfer can happen immediately upon closing. We have pressing obligations. As for Kennedy, do not worry about her authorization. I am handling the family consensus. Just do what needs to be done to clear the path. We cannot afford delays. Do what needs to be done. There it was. The pressure. The premeditation. I scrolled down. Another email. Dated 3 weeks ago. Arthur, I am attaching the meeting summary. This should satisfy the compliance team regarding Kennedy's verbal waiver. She is fully on board. Just difficult with paperwork. File this and release the funds. She is fully on board. I felt a wave of nausea. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had erased my voice. He had spoken for me, lied for me, and used my name to cover his own desperation. Kennedy. I spun around. My mother was standing at the end of the hallway. She was holding a tray of deviled eggs. Her face was pale. What are you doing? She asked. I looked at the screen, then at her. I am reading Dad's emails. I said, I am reading how he told the trust office to do what needs to be done. My mother put the tray down on the hall table. Her hands were shaking so hard the eggs rattled against the ceramic. You shouldn't be in here, she said. This is private. Private, I asked. Like the disclaimer was private. Like the foreclosure was private. She flinched as if I had slapped her. You know about the house, she whispered. I know everything. Mom, I know about the Apex loan. I know about Madison's lease. I know you forged my signature." She slumped against the wall. The facade of the perfect hostess evaporated. She suddenly looked very old and very tired. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said. Her voice was thin, like a child's. "Then how was it supposed to be?" I asked. "We were going to pay you back," she said. She looked at me with pleading eyes. "I swear, Kennedy, we just needed a bridge. The loan, the interest rate was eating us alive. Your father made a bad investment 2 years ago. We lost so much. We were drowning. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why didn't you ask for help and admit we failed?" she cried. "And tell you that your father, the great provider, had lost everything. We couldn't. So you stole from your mother," I said, "and you stole from your daughter." "It wasn't stealing," she insisted, wiping her eyes. "It was borrowing. We are family. Everything ends up in the same pot eventually. We were going to refinance the house with a traditional bank once the credit score was fixed, and then we were going to give you your share." When I asked, "In 5 years?" 10. "I don't know," she wailed, "but we didn't do it to hurt you. We did it to survive." I looked at her. I saw the terror in her eyes. She wasn't a villain. She was a woman who had been living in a house of cards for years, terrified that a stiff breeze would knock it down. She had let my father make the decisions, and she had justified the collateral damage because the alternative public shame was unbearable to her. But that fear had turned her cruel. It had made her watch me doubt my own memory. It had made her call me selfish when I asked for what was mine. Compassion isn't permission. I thought, I can feel sorry for her and still refuse to be her victim. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "intent doesn't change the facts. You committed fraud. You put me in a position where I have to choose between protecting you and protecting myself. You can't tell anyone," she begged. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Kennedy, please. It would kill your father. It would kill him. He should have thought about that before he forged my name." I said. I pulled my arm away. "I am not going to let this slide. Mom, I am done being the buffer." I walked past her, back into the noise of the party. I needed to leave. The air in the house felt toxic. I made it to the back door when Madison intercepted me. She looked frantic. I talked to Dad. She whispered, grabbing my elbow, "You told him I had to. He saw me crying. Kennedy, listen to me. He has a plan." I laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. "Dad always has a plan. That is the problem. He says we can fix this," Madison said. "He says if you just sign a document, a retroactive gift letter, saying that you gave us the money, then the fraud goes away. It becomes a gift, and he promises, he swears, he will pay you back $50,000 next year." I stared at my sister. "He wants me to sign a lie." I said, "He wants me to become an accessory to the fraud. If I sign that, and the IRS investigates, I go down with you, but it saves the family." Madison pleaded, "Why are you being so stubborn? Why do you want to destroy us? I am not destroying you." "Madison, the truth is destroying you. I'm just refusing to lie in the wreckage." My father appeared in the doorway behind Madison. He wasn't smiling anymore. The grillfather apron looked ridiculous now, a costume on a desperate man. "Kennedy," he said. His voice was low, dangerous. "We need to be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Dad, I am leaving. If you walk out that door," he said, stepping closer, "you are choosing to be an outsider." I looked at him. He was using the ultimate weapon, the threat of exile. "If you pursue this," he continued, "if you bring lawyers into this house, you are done. You are not a Russell anymore. No Christmas, no birthdays. You will be dead to us." I looked around the yard. I saw Aunt Carol watching us. I saw the neighbors eating their burgers. I saw the perfectly manicured lawn that was paid for with my grandmother's legacy. I looked back at my father. "I would rather be an orphan than a victim," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. I turned and walked away. I walked down the driveway, past the line of cars. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the invisible threads of obligations snapping, one by one. It hurt worse than the divorce. It hurt like a limb being amputated without anesthesia. But as I got into my car and closed the door, cutting off the humid air and the smell of barbecue, I felt something else. I felt light. I drove back to my apartment. I didn't cry. I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out the draft of the settlement agreement that Elias had sent me. I took a red pen. I crossed out the repayment terms. I wrote in the margins, full repayment within 60 days, immediate sale of the property if necessary, and then I added a new section, Clause 4, Admission of Liability. The undersigned admit to the willful forgery of Kennedy Russell's signature and the unauthorized conversion of estate assets. And another, Clause 5, Identity Protection. The undersigned agreed to a permanent injunction against using Kennedy Russell's name, credit, or identity for any financial purpose. I wasn't just asking for money anymore. I was asking for a surrender. I called Elias. It is a go. I said, "Did you give it to them?" he asked. "No." I said, "I am not going to give it to them at a barbecue. I am going to give it to them properly. I am going to finish this." I hung up the phone. I looked at the picture of Grandma Edith I kept on my fridge. It was a photo of us from years ago. Her arm around my shoulder, both of us laughing, safe and separate. She had said, I was finally separate. Now I just had to be safe. I went to my closet and pulled out my suit. I laid it out for tomorrow. The grieving daughter was gone. The selfish sister was gone. The plaintiff was ready. The binder was heavy. It was a black, 1-inch standard office binder, the kind you could buy at any supply store for $3. But inside it was the demolition of my entire family history. Elias Wren slid it across the mahogany conference table. He did not smile. This was not a happy occasion. This is the complete package. Kennedy, he said. I opened it. The first page was the demand letter. It was terrifyingly polite. It stated, in clear, unadorned English, that Robert and Ellen Russell had knowingly forged the signature of Kennedy Russell on a legal disclaimer, filed it with the probate court, and subsequently misappropriated funds totaling $325,000. It did not use exclamation points. It used statutes. Behind the letter was the evidence summary, the copy of the forged disclaimer, the affidavit from the handwriting expert Elias had consulted, the wire transfer record, the property lien search showing the foreclosure notice, and then the settlement offer. I turned to that section. It was the exit ramp. It was the only way out of the burning building. Terms of Settlement 1. Immediate restitution of the full inheritance amount. 2. Execution of a sworn statement admitting to the forgery to be held in escrow and only released upon breach of this agreement. 3. Payment of all legal fees incurred by Kennedy Russell. 4. A permanent non-disparagement clause. The deadline was tight. 48 hours. If they do not sign by Tuesday at 5 o'clock, Elias said, I file the petition with the court on Wednesday morning. Once it is filed, it is public record. The fraud becomes a matter of the state. I ran my hand over the paper. It felt cool and smooth. This is it, I said. This is it. Elias agreed. You are sure you want to deliver this yourself? I can have a courier do it. It is cleaner. I shook my head. A courier is a stranger. If a stranger hands this to them, they will think it is a bluff. They will think I am hiding behind a lawyer because I am scared. They need to see my face. They need to see that the daughter who used to apologize for taking up space is dead. Elias nodded. He respected the theater of it. Be careful. Kennedy, he said, when people are cornered, they do not act rationally. They bite. I spent the rest of Saturday preparing. I did not go out. I did not clean my apartment. I sat in my living room and practiced my lines. My therapist, Dr. Aris, had given me a script. She called it anchoring language. Do not explain. She had told me, do not justify. Do not engage in the emotional narrative. State the fact, state the consequence, and stop talking. I stood in front of the mirror. This is not a negotiation. I said to my reflection, this is a notification. My voice sounded thin. I tried again. This is not a negotiation. Better. That night, unable to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter I knew I would never send. It was to Grandma Edith. Dear Grandma, I am sorry it took me this long. I am sorry I thought your protection was just a nice sentiment and not a literal shield you tried to hand me. You saw them clearly, didn't you? You saw the hunger in Dad and the fear in Mom, and you knew they would eat me alive if you didn't leave instructions. I found the separate in your card. I am making it real, but it hurts, Grandma. It hurts to cut them off. It feels like I am amputating a limb. I hope you can forgive me for the mess I'm about to make. I hope you understand that I am not destroying the family. I am just refusing to be the fuel they burn to keep it warm. I folded the letter and put it in my jewelry box. Underneath the string of pearls she had left me the only thing my parents hadn't liquidated. Probably because they didn't know it was there. Sunday was the main event. The Labor Day. Send-off. It was an institution in the Russell family. Cousins from 3 towns over would drive in. There would be cornhole tournaments in the backyard, and my mother's famous peach cobbler. I dressed like I was going to court. I wore a charcoal gray suit, a white silk blouse, and heels that clicked sharply on the pavement. I pulled my hair back into a severe, low bun. No loose strands, no softness. I drove to the house at 2 in the afternoon. The street was lined with cars. I could hear the music from the backyard, some playlist of 70s rock that my father loved. I parked my car, grabbed the black binder, and walked up the driveway. I didn't go around to the back gate this time. I walked to the front door. I rang the bell. It took a long time for someone to answer. Finally, my cousin Ben opened the door. He was holding a paper plate with a half-eaten burger. Kennedy, he asked, his eyes widening when he saw the suit. Whoa, you are dressed for a funeral. I am dressed for business. Ben, I said, are they in the backyard? Yeah, he said. Everyone is. I need you to do me a favor. I said, go get my parents. Tell them I am in the dining room. Tell them it is urgent. And Ben. He looked at me, seeing the hard set of my jaw. Don't let anyone else come in, I said. Ben nodded. He put the plate down on the entry table. I got you. I walked into the dining room. It was cool and dim, the table set with the good runner that my mother only used for holidays. I placed the black binder in the exact center of the table. I stood at the head, my hands clasped in front of me. I waited. 5 minutes passed. I could hear the muffled sounds of laughter from the yard. It felt surreal that just through the wall, people were eating potato salad and talking about football, completely unaware that the ground beneath them was about to crack open. Then the door opened. My father walked in first. He was wearing a polo shirt and khaki shorts, his face flushed from the heat and the beer. My mother followed, wiping her hands on a towel. Madison was trailing behind them, looking skittish. Kennedy, what is this? My father demanded. Ben said you were acting strange. Why are you wearing a suit? I didn't smile. I didn't offer a greeting. Please close the door, I said. My father sighed, an exaggerated sound of impatience, and kicked the door shut. We are in the middle of a party. Kennedy, if you are here to make a scene about the other day, save it. We told you the terms. You signed the gift letter, and we pay you back when we can. I looked at him. He still thought he was in charge. He still thought this was a domestic dispute he could manage with volume and authority. I am not here to argue. I said. I pointed to the binder. I am here to serve you. My mother froze. Serve us, she whispered. That binder contains a formal demand for restitution. I said, it also contains a draft of a petition for probate fraud that my attorney is prepared to file with the Superior Court on Wednesday morning. My father stared at the binder like it was a bomb. You are bluffing, he scoffed. You wouldn't file against your own family. I opened the binder. I turned to the evidence summary. I showed them the copy of the disclaimer. I showed them the affidavit from the handwriting expert. I showed them the wire transfer record from the trust to their personal account. And then I showed them the foreclosure notice from Apex Lending. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen next door. My father's face turned a grayish color. My mother gripped the back of a dining chair, her knuckles white. "You found the lien," she whispered. "I found everything." I said, "I know you forged my signature. I know you used the money to save the house. And I know you lied to Madison about where her share went." Madison made a small, whimpering sound. "This is not a negotiation. Dad," I said, looking him in the eye. "You have 48 hours. You sign the settlement agreement. You return the funds. And you admit to the forgery in a sealed document. If you do that, nobody goes to jail. The neighbors don't find out. The cousins don't know. And if we don't," he asked. His voice was raspy. "If you don't," I said, "I file the petition. The court will freeze your assets. The district attorney will likely open a criminal investigation into the forgery, and Linda Vance will be subpoenaed to testify about who asked her to stamp a document without the signatory present." My father slammed his hand on the table. The sudden violence of it made my mother jump. "You ungrateful, disloyal child," he shouted. "After everything I gave you, I put a roof over your head. I paid for your college. And this is how you repay me, by threatening to send me to prison." I didn't flinch. I had practiced this. "You stole $300,000 from me." I said calmly, "That is not parenting. That is a felony. I did it for us," he roared. "I did it to keep this family afloat. Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under? Do you have any idea what it costs to maintain this life? That is not my problem," I said. He looked at me with pure hatred. It was a look I had never seen before. It wasn't disappointment. It was the look of a predator realizing the prey has a gun. "We can't pay it," he spat. "We don't have the cash. The money is gone. We paid Apex. We paid the credit cards. It is gone." "Then sell the house," I said. My mother let out a cry. "Sell the house, Kennedy. This is our home. This is where you grew up. It is a house you can't afford." I said, "And you bought it with my money. Put it on the market. Downsize. I don't care. But I want my inheritance." My father began to pace. He was sweating now. The charm was gone. He looked cornered and dangerous. "We can give you 50,000, he said. "I can pull it from my 401k, 50,000 now, and we set up a payment plan for the rest. Over 10 years. "No." I said, 75, he countered. "And you sign a confidentiality agreement today." "No." I said, "Full restitution. Immediate." "You are trying to ruin us," he screamed. He pointed a finger at my face. "You are doing this out of spite. You are jealous of your sister. You always have been." "This isn't about Madison," I said. "Isn't it?" he sneered. "You think you are so perfect. You think you are the only one who works hard. You don't know the half of it. You don't know what we have had to do to keep her safe." "Robert, stop," my mother said sharply. "No, let her hear it," he yelled. He turned to me, his eyes wild. "You want to know where the rest of the money went? You think it all went to the house?" "It didn't. We had to pay off the settlement." I frowned. "What settlement?" "Madison's settlement," he shouted. I looked at Madison. She had gone pale, her eyes darting between me and Dad. "Dad, don't," she whispered. "Tell her my father commanded. Tell her what you did in Chicago. Madison didn't speak." She just shook her head. My father turned back to me, breathing hard. "Your sister didn't just fail at a business. Kennedy, she got involved with a consulting firm. She signed contracts she didn't read. She authorized transfers she wasn't supposed to. They were going to charge her with corporate fraud." I stared at Madison. "Corporate fraud." "It was a mistake," Madison cried. Finding her voice, "I didn't know what I was signing. They used me. It doesn't matter if you knew," my father yelled at her. "The liability was real. They were going to sue us for $500,000. They were going to go to the police. We had to settle. We had to pay them $200,000 to make it go away and seal the record." He looked back at me, panting. "That is where the money went. Kennedy, we paid off the house, and we paid off the firm in Chicago so your sister wouldn't go to jail. We saved her life, and we used your grandmother's money because it was the only money we had." I stood there, processing the revelation. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the lease. It was a massive, catastrophic legal cleanup. My sister had committed or been an accessory to white-collar crime, and my parents had covered it up. They had used my inheritance to buy her freedom, and then they had looked me in the eye and called me selfish for wanting to know where it went. They had sacrificed my financial future to keep Madison out of prison, and they hadn't even given me the dignity of the truth. I looked at Madison. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the entitlement. She was used to being saved. She was used to the world bending around her mistakes. And I looked at my parents. They were terrified of the scandal. They were terrified that the carefully curated image of the Russell family successful, upstanding, perfect would be shattered. If I file the petition, I said quietly, all of this comes out. The discovery process will find the payments to the Chicago firm. Yes, my father hissed. It will, and your sister will be exposed. Is that what you want? Do you want to destroy her future? You already destroyed her future, I said, by never letting her face a consequence. I looked down at the binder. This changes nothing, I said. My father looked stunned. What? It changes nothing, I repeated. I don't care what you spent the money on. I don't care if you spent it on charity or blackmail. It wasn't yours to spend. Kennedy, please, Madison begged. She stepped forward, reaching for my hand. I will pay you back. I promise. Once I get back on my feet. Just don't file. If this comes out, I will never get a job again. I pulled my hand away. I am not going to lie for you. Madison, I am done lying. My father's face hardened. He realized that the guilt trip wasn't working. The leverage was gone. Fine, he said. His voice was cold now. Dead. You want your money? You will get your money. I will sell the house. I will cash out the retirement. I will burn it all down to pay you. Good, I said. But know this, he said. He stepped close to me, invading my personal space. If you make me do this, if you force me to sell this house, you are not my daughter anymore. You are a creditor. And when I write that check, I never want to see you again. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike. I looked at the man who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding, and I realized he had never really seen me. He had only seen an asset, a compliant, low-maintenance asset that he could draw from when the high-maintenance asset Madison crashed. I felt a tearing sensation in my chest, painful and sharp, but underneath it was a strange, vast relief. I accept those terms, I said. I turned to the table. I opened the binder to the signature page of the settlement agreement. I pulled a pen from my pocket and set it down. You have until Tuesday at 5, I said. I didn't wait for them to answer. I turned and walked toward the door. Kennedy, my mother cried out. Don't leave like this. I didn't stop. I walked out of the dining room, past the hallway where the family photos hung photos of a happiness that had been purchased on credit. I opened the front door and stepped out into the bright, blinding sunlight. The party was still going on. I could hear the thwack of a cornhole bag hitting the board. I could hear Aunt Carol laughing. I walked to my car. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through water. I got in and closed the door. The silence of the car wrapped around me. I looked at the house one last time. It looked the same. The shutters were still perfect. The hydrangeas were still blooming. But to me, it looked like a stage set after the lights had been turned off. I wasn't triumphant. I didn't feel a rush of victory. I felt hollow. I felt a grief so deep it made my bones ache. I had gotten the truth. But the price was the family I had always wanted. I had chosen myself, and in doing so, I had orphaned myself. I put the key in the ignition. I had a deadline. They had 48 hours, but I knew, in my gut, that the check would come. My father would never let the neighbors know he was a fraud. He would sell his soul to keep the image intact. He would pay me to keep me quiet. He would pay me to go away. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I didn't look back. I drove toward the highway, toward my empty apartment, toward the uncertain freedom of a life that was finally, terrifyingly, my own. I was safe, I was separate, and I was alone. Tuesday came and went. The clock on my wall ticked past 5 o'clock, and my phone remained silent. There was no desperate plea, no last-minute wire transfer, No surrender. My father was betting that I was still his daughter. He was betting that when push came to shove, the biological imperative to protect the tribe would override the legal imperative to protect myself. He was betting on a version of Kennedy Russell that no longer existed. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I met Elias Wren at the county courthouse. The air was crisp, the sky a hard, indifferent blue. I signed the petition for probate fraud. I signed the affidavit regarding the forgery. File it, I said. Elias handed the packet to the clerk. The stamp came down with a heavy, final thud. Thwack! It was the sound of a bridge collapsing. By noon, the shockwaves began. The first domino to fall was the trust office. Once the petition was filed, Graybridge Trust Estate Services was named as a respondent. They were no longer a neutral third party. They were potentially liable for negligence. Self-preservation is a powerful solvent. It dissolves loyalty instantly. By Thursday afternoon, Elias called me. They are rolling over. He said, Mr. Pendleton has been placed on administrative leave. The junior officer, Sarah, has provided a sworn declaration. She confirms that she raised concerns about the signature and the out-of-county notary, and that she was instructed to disregard them because your father was the authorized representative. They gave us the internal notes I asked. Everything, Elias said. There is an email from Pendleton to his compliance officer stating, Bob Russell is a longtime client. We do not need to make this difficult for him. Process the disclaimer. They are trying to frame this as your father deceiving them, rather than them being complicit. They are going to hand your parents to the court on a silver platter to save their license. I felt a grim satisfaction. The institution that had dismissed me was now scrambling to align with me, but the reaction from my parents was not the explosion of rage I expected. It was something far more unsettling. It was panic. My cousin Ben texted me on Friday. It is bad over there. Ken, Mom says your dad hasn't slept in 3 days. He is pacing the house all night. Mom is calling everyone, trying to explain why they might be selling the house, but her stories aren't matching up. She told Aunt Carol it was for retirement. She told Uncle Jerry it was the market. They are spiraling. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Then came the voicemails. I had blocked their numbers, but my carrier still deposited the messages in a blocked folder. I listened to them late at night, sitting in the dark. My mother's voice was unrecognizable. It was high and jagged. Kennedy, please. The sheriff came to the house with papers. The neighbors saw. How could you do this? We are your parents. We love you. Please, just call us. We can fix this. My father left only one. He sounded drunk, or exhausted, or both. You win. Are you happy? You burned it all down? I hope the money keeps you warm. He still didn't get it. He thought I wanted to win. I just wanted to stop being the fuel for their fire. On Saturday morning, I found Madison waiting by my car. She looked like a ghost. Her eyes were sunken, her hair unwashed. She wasn't wearing her usual designer armor. She was wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt. I unlocked the car. Get in, I said. We sat in the parked car. It was safer than the apartment. A neutral box. They're going to lose the house, Madison said. Her voice was flat. I know, I said. And Silas, the guy in Chicago. He called me. I looked at her. The consulting firm settlement. He saw the lien notice on Dad's house. Madison said, he tracks their assets. He knows they are in trouble. He called to say that if the settlement payments stop, he goes to the DA in Chicago. He revives the fraud charges against me. She put her head on the dashboard. I am going to jail. Kennedy, Dad can't pay him and you. He is tapped out. Why did you do it? Madison, I asked. The Chicago thing. Why did you sign those papers? Because I wanted to be important. She whispered. The firm. They treated me like I was a genius. They gave me a title. They gave me a corporate card. I just wanted to be like you. Capable. Successful. So when they asked me to sign off on the invoices, I didn't look. I just wanted to keep the feeling. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I am addicted to it. Ken. I am addicted to being saved. Every time I screw up, Dad swoops in. He fixes it. He yells, sure, but he fixes it. It makes me feel loved. It makes me feel like I matter enough to be rescued. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. And now I hate myself. I hate that I let them steal from you. I hate that I needed it. I looked at my sister. For the first time, I didn't see a rival. I saw a casualty. My parents' need to be the heroes had created a daughter who could not function without a crisis. They had crippled her to ensure they would always be necessary. You have to save yourself this time. Madison, I said, I don't know how. She said, then you start by telling the truth. I said, if Silas comes for you, you get a public defender and you face it. You stop letting Dad pay for your life with my name. She nodded slowly. It was a terrifying thought for her. I am sorry. Ken, she said. I know. I said. She got out of the car. I watched her walk away, looking small and fragile. I couldn't fix her. That was the hardest part. I had to let her fall. On Monday, Elias received a settlement offer from the attorney my parents had frantically hired a man named Mr. Gelson, who specialized in criminal defense, which told me everything I needed to know about their mindset. We sat in the conference room reviewing the term sheet. They are offering $275,000. Elias said, that is the bulk of the principal. They are liquidating your father's retirement accounts and taking a second position loan against the house from a high-risk lender to get the cash quickly. And the rest, I asked. They claim inability to pay the full amount without immediate bankruptcy. Elias said, but here's the catch. He pointed to Clause 7. Confidentiality and release of claims. In exchange for this payment, Kennedy Russell agrees to a complete release of all claims, civil and criminal. She agrees to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the existence of the disclaimer, the family meeting summary, and the allocation of funds. She agrees to issue a statement to the probate court that the dispute was a misunderstanding regarding administrative intent. I stared at the words. They want me to lie. I said, they want me to tell the court it was a misunderstanding. They want to buy your silence, Elias said. They want to scrub the record. If you sign this, the fraud allegations vanish. Mr. Pendleton keeps his job. Your parents keep their reputation. You get your money, minus $50,000, and everyone goes back to brunch. I felt a surge of the old nausea. It was tempting. It was so tempting. Take the money, end the war. Let them have their dignity. But if I signed that, I would be agreeing that what they did was acceptable. I would be selling my integrity for $275,000. I can't do it. I said, I knew you would say that, Elias said. He looked proud. I pulled the paper toward me. Counteroffer, I said. I drafted it in my head as I spoke. 1 full repayment, $325,000. I don't care if they have to sell the cars or the furniture. I want every cent. 2, no public statement about a misunderstanding. We will agree to seal the settlement terms, but I will not lie to the probate court. We will file a stipulation of dismissal upon satisfaction, but we will not retract the allegations of the initial petition. The record stands. 3, a written admission of wrongdoing, signed by both of them. It stays in your safe. Elias. But if they ever slander me, or try to use my credit, or tell the family I was the one who stole, we release it. And 4, I added, my voice hardening, a neutral trustee. What do you mean? Elias asked. Grandma left a small trust for future family emergencies. I said, it is tiny, maybe 10 grand, but Dad controls it. I want him removed. I want a neutral third party appointed to handle any future assets related to the Russell family name. He loses his power to move money. Elias wrote it all down. This is aggressive, he said. It strips your father of his 2 favorite things, his money and his control. Send it, I said. The response came 24 hours later. My mother called Elias's office. She wasn't calling for my father. She was calling for herself. She wants to sign. Elias told me over the phone. She told me she can't sleep. She is terrified of the handwriting expert's report. She said, give Kennedy whatever she wants. I just want it to be over. And Dad, I asked. Elias paused. Your father is refusing. He says he will not sign an admission of wrongdoing. He says, and I quote, I will not admit to a crime I committed to save my family. That is not a crime. That is duty. He still sees himself as the hero. I said, he does. Elias said, he sees his control as love. To admit he was wrong is to admit that his love was destructive. He can't do that. Then we proceed. I said, the machine of the law ground forward. On Wednesday, the handwriting expert's official report was filed. It was devastating. Conclusion, highly probable that the signature on the disclaimer of interest is a simulation produced by Robert Russell. On Thursday, the State Banking Commission opened an inquiry into the notary, Linda Vance. She immediately hired a lawyer and signaled she was looking for a deal. She wasn't going to go to jail for my father. The pressure on my parents was hydraulic. It was crushing them from all sides. Friday morning, Elias called. They want a meeting. He said, all of them. In my office. Today at 2? This is it, I asked. This is it, Elias said. Either they sign the counteroffer, or we go to trial. I walked into the conference room at Harlow Wren at 2 o'clock sharp. My parents were already there. They sat on one side of the table. My mother looked shrunken, her eyes red-rimmed. My father looked aged. His skin was gray. His posture slumped, but his jaw was set in a line of stubborn defiance. Madison was there, too. She sat at the end of the table, looking at her hands. I sat next to Elias. I placed my copy of the paper, the final settlement agreement, on the table. Thank you for coming, Elias said. His voice was calm, professional. We are here to finalize the resolution of the estate of Edith Russell. My father spoke first. His voice was gravel. We have the money, he said. He slid a cashier's check across the table. I looked at it. $325,000. We liquidated the IRA, he said, and we took the high-interest loan. We are ruined. Kennedy, if that makes you happy, we have nothing left for retirement. We will probably lose the house in 6 months anyway. I didn't touch the check. The money is only part of the agreement. Dad, I said. I know. He snapped. He pointed to the document. You want me to sign this confession. You want me to sign a paper saying I am a criminal. You forged my signature. I said, you are a criminal. I am your father, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I did what I had to do. Madison was in trouble. The house was in trouble. I took care of it. That is what fathers do. We take the burden. I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his shouting like a razor. Fathers protect their children. I said, you didn't protect me. You cannibalized me. You looked at my life, my stability, and you decided it was a resource you were entitled to harvest. I leaned forward. You didn't do it for the family, Dad. You did it for your ego. You did it because you couldn't bear for people to know you had failed. You sacrificed my dignity to save your pride. He stared at me, his chest heaving. I will not sign it, he hissed. I will not give you that weapon. Then we go to trial. I said. I looked at Elias. File the criminal referral. I said. My mother let out a sound like a wounded animal. No, she screamed. She grabbed my father's arm. Robert, sign it. Sign the damn paper, Ellen. He started. I can't do this anymore. She sobbed. I can't live like this. I don't care about the pride. I don't care about the house. I just want to sleep. They are going to put you in jail. Robert, sign it. My father looked at her. He looked at the terror in her face. For the first time, he seemed to see the cost of his protection. He looked at Madison. She was crying silently. He looked at me. There was no love in his eyes, only a cold, hard realization of defeat. Give me the pen, he whispered. He took the pen. His hand shook violently. He signed the admission of wrongdoing. He signed the settlement agreement. He signed the trustee resignation. My mother signed next. Then Madison signed the witness line. Elias took the documents. He checked the signatures. He placed the cashier's check in my file. It is done, Elias said. My father stood up. He looked small. "You got what you wanted." He said to me, "You have your money, and you have your paper." He buttoned his jacket with trembling fingers. "Don't come to Christmas," he said. "Don't call us. As far as I'm concerned, I have 2 daughters, and one of them died when she walked into this office." I stood up. I felt a strange lightness, like gravity had released me. "I didn't die. Dad," I said, "I just woke up." He turned and walked out. My mother followed him, pausing for a second to look at me with a tragic, helpless expression, before hurrying after him. Madison stayed for a moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what I asked. For forcing me to stop." She said. She stood up. "I am going to call the public defender on Monday." She said, "I am going to deal with Chicago. Good luck, Madison." I said. She left. I was alone in the conference room with Elias. The silence was absolute. I sat down in the leather chair. I felt exhausted, drained to the marrow. "You did good, Kennedy," Elias said softly. "You stood your ground." I nodded. "It doesn't feel like a victory. It never does," he said. "It just feels like the end of a long illness." He opened his briefcase. "There is one more thing," he said. He pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax. "When we seized the files from the trust office, we found this." Elias said, "It wasn't in the main file. It was in a safe deposit box your grandmother kept at the firm, separate from the estate documents. The instruction on the outside says, 'To be given to Kennedy only after the settlement of my estate.'" He handed it to me. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was shaky, spidery, and beloved. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of floral stationery. "My dearest Kennedy, if you are reading this, it means there was a fight. I am sorry. I knew there would be. I knew your father would try to take what was yours. He is a man who builds castles out of sand and demands everyone else hold back the tide. I tried to protect you with the trust, but I knew legal walls might not be enough. I knew you would have to stand up for yourself. I was afraid you wouldn't. You have always been so kind, so willing to smooth things over. But I also knew that underneath that kindness, there is steel. You are the only one in this family who sees the truth. You are the only one strong enough to end the cycle. Do not feel guilty for claiming what is yours. Do not feel guilty for saying no. You are breaking a chain that has bound this family for generations. That is the real inheritance I wanted to give you the permission to be free. I love you. You are safe now. Grandma Edith." The tears came then. They didn't come from anger or grief or relief. They came from the sudden, overwhelming feeling of being seen. She had known exactly what would happen, and she had trusted me to handle it. She hadn't just left me money, she had left me a test, and she had believed I would pass it. You are the only one strong enough to end the cycle. I pressed the letter to my chest. I cried for the little girl who tried to be perfect. I cried for the woman who thought she was selfish. And I cried for the parents who chose the lie over the daughter. But mostly, I cried because she was right. I was free. I walked out of the law firm into the late afternoon sun. The city of Graybridge looked different. The colors were sharper. The noise of the traffic sounded like music. I had $325,000 in the bank. I had a confession in a safe. But as I walked down the sidewalk, blending into the crowd of strangers, I realized I had something much more valuable. I had my name back. And this time, nobody was ever going to sign it but me. Thank you for listening to my story. It has been a difficult journey to share, but I believe that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that set us free. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with your family to protect yourself? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found value in this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. We explore the complex, messy, and real paths people take to find justice. Thank you for being my witness.